"Excuse me, sir, my late dad had that exact mark." The silver fork halted midair. Graham Whitaker, the billionaire whose surname crowned half of downtown Chicago, locked onto the young server beside him. Her voice trembled, but her hand didn't. Her stare pinned the inside of his left wrist like a spotlight. He blinked once, slow, like his brain needed extra time. Then he followed her gaze. A faint crescent birthmark, nickel-sized, faded with years, sat where it always had. Around them, the gala kept breathing. Laughter, crystal clinks, soft jazz from the corner trio. But at table 7, time thinned. Graham lowered his fork with deliberate control. "I'm sorry," he said, calm enough to sound cold. Talia eased back a step, apron brushing linen. She still gripped a water pitcher like it was an anchor, and her words, already spoken, hung heavier than any chandelier above them. I didn't mean to interrupt," she rushed. "My mom used to tell me, if I ever met a man with a moon-shaped mark on his wrist, I should remember it, because my father had one too." Graham's focus sharpened. His chief aide leaned in, whispering urgently. Graham didn't answer, just stared, stunned. His mouth opened as if truth might fall out. Nothing did. Talia nodded, swallowed, and pivoted toward the kitchen doors. The room's noise slammed back into her ears. People's eyes on her like pins. Some curious, some bored, some already judging. She kept walking anyway, shoulders squared against the heat of attention. Behind her, Graham watched her disappear. His posture stiffened, thumb rubbing the mark like he could erase the moment. He hadn't thought about Selena Walker in years, yet her name hit him like surf against stone. Savannah, 2001. The girl with paint-stained hands and dusk-colored eyes that never apologized for shining. The girl his family branded a mistake, the one he let slip away because he didn't have the backbone to stand beside her. They'd parted on that river bridge, promising nothing, meaning everything. She vanished months later. She never said she was pregnant. He never knew. Now, this young woman stood in the wreckage of his denial. Could it be real? His mind fought it. Impossible, ridiculous, until it wasn't. He barely spoke through the rest of dinner, face composed, spirit cracked. Talia, in the staff corridor, stood numb at her locker while her manager hissed words like unprofessional and VIP experience. None of it landed. Only Graham's look did. Not anger, not mockery, recognition, like a memory refusing to stay buried. That night, Chicago wind curled through Southside alleys, and Talia sat alone in her room. No tears, no journaling, just silence and a small photo taped to her mirror. Selena, 22, in a hospital gown, holding newborn Talia like she was hope. Talia opened a drawer and unfolded a yellowed envelope with no address, no stamp, just her mother's handwriting. A letter never mailed. To the man who never knew. She traced the ink with her thumb and whispered, "If our daughter finds you, please be kind. Please be better than silence." Her breath hitched. "Mom, I think I found him." Across the city, in a glass-walled penthouse that felt like a museum of wealth, Graham stood by the window. Alone. Moonlight washed his left wrist. He stared at the crescent like it had become a verdict. For the first time in decades, his heart said a name he'd trained himself not to speak. Selena. And something unspoken, old and aching, shifted toward healing. Tap like if you're rooting for Talia to find her roots. And tell us where you're watching from. Because somewhere nearby, someone's living this same silence right now. Graham hadn't left his penthouse since the gala. The city glittered outside, restless and alive. Inside, everything sat still, like the pause between inhale and collapse. He didn't eat. Didn't return the messages flashing on his phone. He sat in a leather chair, elbow on knee, fingertips drumming the soft skin near the mark. Talia's voice looped in his head. Her face wouldn't release him. And Selena's name, unused for 21 years, pressed against his throat like a confession. He closed his eyes and Savannah surged back. Humid evenings, magnolias, crickets, Selena barefoot in his family's garden, humming while she painted bold oils, colors that refused to shrink. He loved her visibility. Then his father saw them. Then the calls started. Then the order came. You will not stain our legacy with this. He didn't fight. He told himself surrender was practical. Selena left weeks later without a word. He never chased the reason. Now he opened his laptop with hands that felt older than they were. He typed her name slowly. Selena Walker, Savannah, Georgia. Records surfaced, then an obituary, 8 years ago, cervical cancer. Survived by one daughter, Talia Elise Walker. No father listed. His throat tightened until swallowing hurt. He clicked the photo. Older Selena, same eyes, same tilt of defiance. Funeral home, Hillcrest Chapel, Savannah. Graham shut the laptop and stared at the dark screen as if it might speak back. She never told me, he whispered, but the words felt incomplete. Across town, Talia stirred soup at Mrs. Hargrove's kitchen table, barely tasting. The older woman stood at the stove, glasses low on her nose, stirring a pot like she could calm storms. He saw it, Talia said quietly. The mark. Her hands shook around the spoon. His did too. Mrs. Hargrove turned, wooden spoon in hand, eyes steady. Some men shake because they've seen a ghost baby. Others shake because the truth finally found them. Talia's face looked washed out under the kitchen light. Did Mom ever tell you who he was? She asked. The older woman sighed like she'd carried that name for years. She said Graham once. No last name, until she showed me a magazine photo when he was just rising. Mrs. Hargrove's mouth tightened. She called him kind-eyed and weak-spined. Talia exhaled sharp. She never told me that. She didn't want you hating a ghost, Mrs. Hargrove said, or chasing one. I'm not chasing, Talia insisted, but her voice cracked anyway. I just deserve to know where I come from. Mrs. Hargrove nodded slowly, like granting permission and warning at once. You do, but decide what you want, sweetheart. Truth and family don't always arrive in the same package, and sometimes they cut different ways. The next morning, Graham sat in his private office on the 38th floor, papers spread like a battlefield. He'd summoned his personal investigator, a retired FBI man named Miles Grant. Quiet, precise, owed favors stacked like bricks. Graham slid the obituary and photo across the desk. I need confirmation, he said. Discreet, complete. Miles lifted a brow. Legal clarity or moral clarity? I'm not asking you to stalk her, Graham snapped, then softened. I'm asking for truth. Miles nodded once. Give me 48 hours. Graham leaned back, but his body refused stillness. His mind kept returning to Talia's face, and the way she looked like she wanted nothing from him, that made it worse. He wasn't used to being unnecessary. He picked up a letter, Selena's, dated 2002, ink faded but sharp. It had been buried among old records Miles had once collected, yet Graham had avoided reading it for years. Now he unfolded it, hands stiff, and the first line hit like a slap. You never fought for me. He swallowed, eyes burning. "But I hope you'll fight for her if she finds you." He set the page down and pressed fingers to his eyes. For the first time in a long time, he felt the weight of a life carefully curated, yet hollow. That night, Talia sat on her bed with a laptop warming her thighs, hovering over words she'd typed and deleted 10 times. "I think I know who my father is." Delete, rewrite. Delete again. She clicked through articles about Graham Whitaker, interviews, profiles, glossy praise. One quote snagged her. He'd spent summers in Savannah during college. Another line made her stomach twist. "We build luxury on forgotten land." She thought of Selena, working, painting, coughing quietly through pain. Her mother always said, "You don't need a name to know your worth." And yet here Talia was, craving a name like it might explain the empty chair at every school event. She opened a new blog draft, "The Girl with No Father," and a birthmark full of questions. Her fingers flew, anger and clarity braided together. "I met a man last night. He didn't recognize me, but he recognized something, a mark on his wrist, and maybe something deeper." She wrote fast. This wasn't about money, not about inheritance. It was about identity, about a daughter raised in silence, and a man who built empires with polished forgetting, while her mother's paint dried in the dark. She saved it as a draft, not published. Not yet. But the silence was getting too loud to carry. Graham didn't sleep. City lights flickered below his window like restless thoughts. By morning, a slim file sat on his desk. Miles moved fast. Hospital records, death certificate, old addresses, and a school form from 2007 where father was left blank like a wound, clipped behind it. A recent photo of Talia stepping out of a subway station, headphones on, sketchbook tucked under her arm. She looked nothing like Selena at 22, yet everything in her walk echoed Selena's stubborn grace. Graham stared until his vision blurred. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. And somewhere deep, an uglier answer waited, because he didn't want to be forced to choose. Talia, didn't know he had watched. She went to the library that afternoon without telling anyone. Not for novels, for proof, for memory. In the archives corner, she scrolled microfilm of Savannah papers from 2001, searching for something. Then she found it. A tiny article, page 6, July 2001. Whitaker Development announces Riverside Project. The photo was grainy, black and white, but she recognized him. Young Graham, standing proud beside city officials. Her heart knocked hard when she noticed the left edge. Her mother. Selena, half caught in frame near an easel, paint-smeared hand lifted mid-wave. Talia zoomed until pixels broke apart. Under the photo, local artist Selena Walker assists with mural concept. That was all. No headline about what happened after. No mention of Selena disappearing. No record of how a young artist got erased while the billionaire's story got polished. Talia leaned back, throat thick, hands trembling. All her life, she'd assumed her father simply vanished. But what if it wasn't that simple? What if someone had erased her mother on purpose, quietly, efficiently, forever? The next morning, her post wasn't a draft anymore. Talia hit publish. Within hours, it spread through online corners like wildfire. Children of absent parents, Black artist communities, and think piece writers hungry for stories about wealth and responsibility. Graham read it at his desk, every word. "I don't want inheritance," it said. "I want answers. I deserve them." He closed the laptop slowly, like shutting a coffin. Something inside him settled, and something else cracked. He'd spent decades stacking power, adding zeros, sculpting control, mastering silence. None of it prepared him for a 22-year-old voice demanding to know if he remembered love. He called Miles again. "Get me her number," he said. "I want to meet." Miles hesitated. "Sir, what are you hoping she'll say?" Graham stared at his wrist. "I'm not hoping," he answered. "I'm listening." When the call finally reached Talia, she let it go to voicemail. The message was short, steady, unmistakable. "Miss Walker, this is Graham Whitaker. I'd like to speak privately at your convenience." She didn't call back that day or the next. Instead, she rode the train to Mrs. Hargrove's apartment and found the older woman pruning window plants, humming Ella Fitzgerald like the world wasn't trembling. "He reached out," Talia said from the doorway. Mrs. Hargrove didn't look up. "And what did you say?" "Nothing," Talia replied. "Not yet." Mrs. Hargrove's hands kept moving. "Sometimes silence is the first answer." Talia sank into a chair, eyes on the window. "Do you think he knew?" she asked. Mrs. Hargrove exhaled. "Some men never ask because they're scared of what they'll find. Others don't ask because they already know, and they prefer the comfort of pretending." Outside, a kid rode by, laughing, free as air. Talia felt a tight twist in her chest. "Do I meet him?" she asked. Mrs. Hargrove finally turned. "That depends. Are you looking for a father, or just the truth?" Talia opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't know. She only knew the Aish had a voice now, and it was demanding daylight. Later that evening, she stood on the corner of Jackson and 19th with her phone glowing like a dare. One number, one step. She dialed. It rang once. "Mr. Whitaker," she said softly. A pause, then his voice. "Yes, Talia." She swallowed. "I got your message." He sounded calm, but not untouched. "Would you meet me tomorrow morning, just to talk?" The word tomorrow tasted sharp. She hesitated, then remembered Selena's unsent letter. "Please be better than silence." "Yes," Talia said. 10 a.m. "I'll send the cafe address," Graham replied. When she hung up, something heavy shifted inside her. Didn't vanish, just moved. Tomorrow wasn't forgiveness. Tomorrow was a door cracking open. The bell above the cafe door chimed when Talia stepped in. A small corner spot on the south side, near the old art supply store Selena loved. Wood-paneled walls displayed local paintings, bright, messy, honest. She'd chosen it deliberately. If she faced the man who might be her father, she wanted the room to remember her mother. Graham was already there in the back, alone. No entourage, no assistant, no briefcase. Just a black wool coat folded neatly and a porcelain cup untouched. Talia paused, then crossed the room. He stood when he saw her. "Talia," he said, softer than she expected. She nodded. "Mr. Whitaker." He gestured to the seat across from him like offering space, not power. She sat without removing her coat. Neither spoke first. She'd gone first her whole life. First to ask, first to care, first to wait for someone who never came. Let him carry the opening now. Graham cleared his throat. "Thank you for meeting." "I didn't do it for you," she said flatly. He accepted the strike without flinching. "I understand." Silence settled again, this time not awkward, but shared and heavy. "I read your blog," he said, "all of it." Talia held his gaze. "Then you know why I'm here." He nodded. "You want answers." "No," she corrected, voice steel. "I deserve them." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. "I didn't know about you," he said quietly. "Not until the gala. When you spoke, I saw Selena in you," he admitted. Your face, your fire. It shook me." Talia blinked fast, refusing tears. "You say you didn't know," she pressed. "But did you ever wonder?" Graham stared down at his hands, then up again. "Yes," he said. "Early on, I did. After she left, I thought about reaching out. Then my family, my fear, won." He swallowed. "That's not an excuse. I was a coward." Talia's voice dropped. "Yes, you were." He nodded once, like accepting a sentence. "And I'll carry that for the rest of my life." The coffee between them cooled into bitterness. Talia inhaled. "She painted you," she said suddenly. "My mom. Even when she hated herself for it. Every canvas was a memory you didn't earn." Graham's throat moved, but he didn't speak. Talia continued, voice sharper. "She said you had kind eyes." She let out a short, broken laugh. "I never believed her until now." Graham leaned forward, hands clasped. "I would give anything to undo what I failed to do," he said. "But I can't. All I can offer is truth, acknowledgement, and whatever presence you'll allow." Talia studied him, wrinkles by his eyes, silver at his temples, the weight of years he couldn't buy back. "I'm not here for your money," she said. "Not your last name. I don't want a house or a trust." "I believe you," he replied, voice low. "Then listen," she said, steadying herself. "Did you love her? Did you love my mother?" Graham didn't look away. "Yes," he said. "More than I knew how to show." Talia's eyes glassed, but she blinked hard. "And me?" she asked, softer, almost frightened of the answer. "If you'd known, would you have wanted me?" Graham reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded photograph, creased from time, heavy with regret. He placed it on the table. Talia leaned forward. Black and white. Selena barefoot by a river, pregnant, hands resting on her belly, radiant and alone. Talia's hand flew to her mouth. "She sent this," Graham said. "I never opened the envelope, not until last week." The shame in his voice wasn't theatrical, it was quiet, lethal. "I didn't want to know, because knowing would make me accountable," he confessed, eyes damp, "and I was too weak to be accountable." He looked at her like a man asking permission to breathe. "I'm not asking you to forgive that. I'm asking if you'll let me try now." Talia couldn't speak for a long beat. The cafe felt smaller, the light warmer, her mother's voice echoing. "Ask if he's different." She met his eyes. "I don't hate you," she said, "but I don't know you, and I don't know what to do with that." Graham nodded, relief and grief mixing. "You don't have to decide today," he said, "or tomorrow. I'll take what you can offer." A waitress refreshed the coffee, but neither touched it. The moment wasn't about comfort. Talia reached into her bag and pulled out a small sketch, edges worn. She set it beside the photo. It was a child's drawing of Selena smiling, and an imagined man beside her. Moon-shaped mark penciled faintly on his wrist. Graham stared like he'd been struck. "You drew this?" he asked, voice rough. "I was 10, Talia said. "I made you up." His fingers trembled as he touched the paper's corner. "You gave me more kindness than I deserved," he murmured. Talia stood, slipping her bag strap over her shoulder. "This isn't kindness," she said. "It's memory." Graham swallowed. "Will you let me see you again?" She hesitated at the table like a judge weighing evidence. "I don't know, but I'll think about it." She turned to leave, pausing at the door. "I don't need a father," she said, voice firm. "I never had one, and I'm still standing." Her gaze cut clean. "But if you want to be someone I can respect. That matters more than DNA." Then she walked into the morning sun, leaving Graham with a child's sketch and his own silence. Graham sat in the back of his limousine, still holding the drawing like it might burn. He didn't speak on the ride. The driver didn't ask. Everyone around Graham had learned the difference between quiet and sacred. Back at the penthouse, he went straight to his study, coat still on, lights off, late sun stretching shadows across the floor like long regrets. He unlocked the bottom desk drawer he hadn't opened in years. Inside sat 3 yellowed envelopes, all in Selena's delicate handwriting. He picked the first one up and opened it, this time for real. His hands were steadier now. No more hiding. "Dear Graham," it began, "if you're reading this, you finally stop pretending the past doesn't matter." His chest tightened. The letter didn't soothe him. It exposed him. Selena wrote about fear, about pressure, about shame that wasn't hers to carry. She admitted she left because she was told to, because she was scared of what his name could do to their future. She didn't tell him about the baby because she refused to let their child feel like a secret. She begged him to love out loud. Graham folded the letter carefully and pressed it to his palm like a promise. He'd built a career on anticipating every risk, controlling every outcome, but no negotiation had ever left him this stripped. Talia's line replayed like scripture. "Be someone I can respect." He slid the letter into his inner coat pocket. This one wouldn't go back in a drawer. Talia didn't tell Mrs. Hargrove about the meeting right away. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, slicing apples with robotic precision, while the evening news droned in the background. Mrs. Hargrove knew better than to press. Finally, Talia spoke, quiet. "He brought a picture." Mrs. Hargrove turned from the stove. "Of who?" "My mom," Talia said, "pregnant, by the river." The older woman's face softened, then hardened with old anger. She sat across from Talia slowly. "He kept it all these years?" Talia nodded once. "He never opened the envelope until last week." Mrs. Hargrove released a long breath, like letting go of a burden she'd carried alone for decades. In Graham's study, the second envelope waited. He opened it. Selena's words were gentler, but sharper in their truth. She wished she'd been braver. Wished he had been too. She described leaving Savannah, alone, scared, determined that their child would never be treated like a stain. She wrote that Talia was bright, fierce, deserving of more than a ghost for a father. Graham read until the lines blurred. "You never fought for me," Selena wrote, "but I hope you'll fight for her." His throat tightened. He stared at the darkness beyond the glass, the city humming like it didn't care. For the first time, he understood that his wealth hadn't protected him from consequence. It had only delayed the moment it arrived. He thought about Selena painting in bare feet, humming like hope was natural. He thought about the bridge, the goodbye, the years he'd filled with deals to avoid feeling. Then he thought of Talia walking out of that cafe, unyielding, honest, unbought. The emptiness he'd called success suddenly looked like a room with no air. He pressed the letter to his chest and exhaled. He folded it with care, like folding a life he could never return to. The third envelope remained, but he couldn't open it yet. Not because he lacked courage, because he finally had too much. Across town, Talia's knife kept cutting apples into neat slices, hand steady, eyes distant. Mrs. Hargrove didn't speak. She simply waited, offering the only thing Talia truly needed, safe silence. At last, Talia murmured, "He had a photograph." Mrs. Hargrove turned fully, attention sharp. "Of Selena?" Talia nodded. "Pregnant, standing by the river." The older woman sat down slowly, as if her knees suddenly remembered every year. "He kept it," she whispered. Talia swallowed. "He did. And he finally opened the envelope. Guilt is a strange animal. Sometimes it goes quiet the longer you starve it, but when it finally wakes up, it doesn't whisper." Talia set the knife down. "He said he loved her, said he never knew about me." "Do you believe him?" Her voice cracked. "I don't know," she admitted. "I want to, but I need it." Mrs. Hargrove reached across the table and covered Talia's hand with her weathered palm. "Needing something doesn't make it fake," she said softly. "It makes you human." The next morning, Graham Whitaker made another call. This one to his longtime attorney, Peter Alden, a man who'd watched his empire grow and his heart shrink. "I need to update my will," Graham said. A pause. Peter's voice stayed professional. "We talking percentages or people?" "Both," Graham answered. "There's someone I need included. Her name is Talia Walker." Peter didn't push for details. He'd worked for Graham too long to flinch, but his tone gentled anyway. "That's a major step, sir," Peter said. "Are you sure?" Graham stared at his own reflection in the dark window. "No," he admitted. "But it's the first step I've been scared of in years. That tells me it matters." After the call, he spent hours digging through old files, deeds, foundations, plans, and the past. One envelope stopped him. Cold, red-stamped return to sender across Selena Walker's handwriting. She hadn't disappeared. She'd been blocked, turned away by assistants and gatekeepers he'd never questioned. Graham held it like a live wire, then set it carefully beside Talia's childhood sketch on his desk, jaw tight with new resolve. That evening, Talia checked her email and found a message from Graham. No subject line, just a confession stripped of polish. "You owe me nothing. I owe you both acknowledgement." He wrote about a press event in 3 days, not for publicity, for truth, and promised he wouldn't speak her name without permission. Talia read it 3 times, then closed the laptop and stepped onto her balcony. Chicago sprawled below, vast, indifferent, relentless. Yet something in the air felt like it was shifting, like a long-held breath finally cracking. She didn't know if she wanted the world to know her, but she knew she wanted Selena to be seen. Inside, Talia opened the old sketchbook her mother had given her on her 15th birthday. On the first page, Selena's handwriting, "Art is truth with a heartbeat. Use it when the world stops listening." Talia smiled, small, shaky, then grabbed a pencil and started drawing again, not from rage, but from room finally made for her voice. 3 days later, the Whitaker Foundation held its winter press conference. January, cold, sharpened the air, cutting through wool coats and forced smiles. The venue was the grand atrium of Whitaker Tower. Glass walls, marble floors, a podium built for announcements, not confessions. Cameras lined up like weapons. Reporters buzzed, expecting numbers and applause. Graham stood behind the velvet curtain, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. His aide handed him the speech he'd written, edited, rewritten. Graham folded it once, twice, then slid it into his jacket. He wouldn't read it. "Talia's not here," the aide whispered, scanning the front row. "At least not that we can tell." Graham nodded once. "That's fine," he said. "This isn't about who's watching." Then he stepped onto the stage. Flashes popped. The crowd settled into their usual hunger for a headline. They expected branding banners, a donation figure, a shiny future. They didn't expect Graham to approach the mic with no slides and no safety net. "Good morning," he began, voice echoing off the glass ceiling. "Thank you for coming. Today, I was supposed to speak about investment growth and community expansion. Instead, I'm going to speak about something I should have said a long time ago." He touched the folded paper in his pocket like a talisman, then lifted his eyes and chose truth. "In 2001, I fell in love with a woman named Selena Walker," he said. "She was a painter, brilliant, stubborn, compassionate, and she was black." A few people shifted uneasy. Graham didn't flinch. "I let fear guide my silence. My family, my reputation, my status. I let all of it speak louder than my heart. I walked away," he continued. "I didn't fight for her. I told myself it was for the best." A ripple of quiet shock moved through the room. "But the truth is, I was a coward." One camera shutter clicked louder than the rest, as if even the equipment couldn't believe what it was capturing. Graham paused and let the air thicken. "I didn't know that when she left. She was pregnant," he said. "She didn't tell me. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she didn't trust me to stay, and I don't blame her." The atrium felt suddenly too large for anyone to hide. His voice lowered. 22 years later, her daughter found me. "Not with a lawyer," Graham said. "Not with anger. With a quiet voice and a question I wasn't ready for." He lifted his left hand and touched the inside of his wrist. "She said, 'My late father had the same mark.'" His breath caught once, then steadied. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because silence has a cost. Because love is not something we should be afraid to speak," he said, "no matter how powerful we are." He stepped back from the mic like it burned. The absence of action can betray as deeply as a lie. His eyes scanned the room, then softened just briefly. "I failed 2 people. I can't change that, but I will spend the rest of my life honoring them." Then he walked off, no questions, no press release, just the truth, finally spoken out loud. Across the city, Talia sat on Mrs. Hargrove's worn couch with a live stream playing. The video was grainy, but Graham's words hit clean. She didn't move when he said Selena's name, didn't move when he called himself a coward. Only when he touched his wrist did she exhale, long and shaky. Mrs. Hargrove stood nearby, arms folded, dish towel slung over her shoulder. "He did it?" she whispered. Talia couldn't answer. Her throat felt locked, but her hands gripped the couch cushion so tight her knuckles paled. Part of her had always believed men like him stayed silent forever, and the world let them. Yet here he was, standing alone in public truth. That evening, Talia walked through Lincoln Park bundled in her mother's old coat. Lake wind bit her cheeks, but she welcomed the sting. She walked until the sun dropped low, turning frozen water gold. At a small statue along the garden path, an artist's hands cast in bronze, Talia stopped and pulled out an envelope she'd written the night before. She opened it one more time and read her own words like a test of courage. "Mr. Whitaker, thank you for saying her name. Thank you for not hiding behind lawyers." She wrote that she didn't know what she wanted in the cafe, but she'd wanted to see if the man he'd been could face the woman she was. "You did," she wrote. "One conversation at a time." Talia placed the letter into the bronze hand of the statue. Not for anyone to find, just for her to leave something behind. A symbol, a release. Then she turned and walked away, boots crunching softly in thin snow, heart still heavy but no longer buried under unanswered questions. Graham found the letter on his desk the next morning, delivered in a plain white envelope with no return address. He read it 3 times. His eyes stung, but he didn't wipe them. He laid it gently beside Selena's letters and Talia's childhood sketch. 3 artifacts, 3 truths, 3 stories no longer forced into shadows. For the first time in decades, Graham didn't feel alone in his office. He felt witnessed, like the walls weren't just trophies anymore, like the air had softened. Maybe, just maybe, he could become someone worth seeing. Not because of buildings or headlines, but because he finally chose the hard thing, showing up without armor. 2 days after the press conference, Talia stood before a full-length mirror in a downtown art gallery's back room. Palms sweating. She wasn't used to heels or blazers or anything that made her look like she belonged on a panel. But tonight, she was scheduled to speak at a community forum on art and identity. Her sketchbook hugged her ribs like a shield. On the first page, she'd drawn Selena's eyes the night before. Imperfect, but careful, like prayer. The invitation had come from the gallery director, Maren Cole, a sharp, warm woman in her early 40s. Maren had read Talia's blog and said, "You have a voice. We'd be honored if you used it here." Talia had said yes before fear could veto her. Mrs. Hargrove waited near the entrance in her Sunday coat, eyes gleaming with pride. "He's coming," she whispered when Talia joined her. Talia didn't ask who. Graham arrived alone, no assistant, no camera crew, just a quiet figure in a dark wool coat standing by the door, like he wasn't sure he deserved to enter the room. Their eyes met across the crowd. Graham nodded once, small, respectful. Talia didn't smile, but she didn't look away. The panel opened with questions about community memory, forgotten voices, and the power of personal archives. Talia listened until the moderator, Denise Hart, turned to her with a steady, curious gaze. "Talia Walker," Denise said, "you've lived through a personal discovery that speaks to race, silence, and family. What do we risk when we let history remain untold?" Talia took the microphone slowly, fingers gripping tighter than she meant to. Her breath sounded loud in her own ears. Then she began, voice steadying as truth rose to meet it. "I think we risk turning people into shadows," Talia said. "Not just in records, not just in archives, but in our own lives." She swallowed. "We forget who shaped our laugh, our nose, our stubbornness. We pretend silence is safety." Her eyes swept the room. "But silence isn't safety, it's theft. Quiet theft. My mother was erased," she continued, "not loudly, gradually, and I lived with the echo." She glanced toward Graham. He watched her with a face holding sorrow and something like pride. "I didn't know my father's name until recently, but I always knew something was missing, something deliberate." Her voice didn't shake now. "Tonight I'm telling the missing part out loud. I'm not here to shame anyone," Talia said. "I'm here because every child deserves to be known, not just as someone's daughter, but as someone with a story." She paused, letting the room breathe. "Sometimes it takes 22 years and a single birthmark to begin telling it." Silence held the gallery. Then applause started, quiet, then growing, like release spreading through lungs. Afterward, Graham waited near the refreshment table, holding black coffee he hadn't touched. When Talia approached, he straightened like a man trying not to take up too much space. "You spoke like someone who knows herself," he said gently. "I'm trying to," Talia replied. The pause between them wasn't tense. It was honest. Graham swallowed. "I meant what I said," he added. "I don't want to force myself into your life," Graham said. "But I want to be there, if there's room, even a corner." Talia looked down, then up. "I don't have answers," she admitted. "I still feel fragile around all this. Around you." Graham nodded once, accepting the truth without bargaining. "Then we go slow," he said. "One step at a time." Talia reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped box. "Here," she said, offering it. Graham opened it carefully. Inside was a framed print of the sketch she'd drawn at 10. Selena, little Talia, and an imagined father, each wrist marked with a crescent. But Talia had added a new line beneath it in pencil. "We were never lost, just waiting to be found." Graham's fingers curled around the frame like it might break him. His eyes watered, but he didn't wipe them. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me be part of your truth." Talia nodded. "Truth deserves witnesses," she replied, "even late ones." They didn't hug, not yet. But they stood closer than before, side by side, no longer pretending silence was strength. Outside, snow began falling. Soft, steady, forgiving. Graham offered his coat. Talia shook her head, then surprised herself with the smallest smile. "Let's walk," she said. And they did, under the quiet sky, each step a small promise, not of perfection, but of presence. Savannah smelled the same. Wet earth, sweet decay, Spanish moss hanging like whispers from old trees. Talia hadn't been back since Selena's funeral 8 years earlier, and stepping off the train felt like walking into a memory drenched in sun and silence. Graham stood beside her holding white camellias, hands wrapped tight around the bouquet like a penance. He'd offered to drive from the station. Talia declined. She wanted to walk. She wanted the ache in her legs to match the ache in her chest. They moved through the old district in quiet. Cobblestone, porch swings, shuttered shops, each corner tugging a thread of childhood. Graham looked like he wanted to speak every few steps, but didn't. For once, Talia didn't fill the quiet. Some things didn't need words. At Hillcrest Cemetery, late afternoon, light spilled through magnolia branches and scattered soft gold across gravestones. Talia paused at the gate. "She brought me here on Sundays," she said. "Not just to visit. She'd sketch the angels, the trees, the way light touches stone. She said even cemeteries have stories worth telling." Graham's voice dropped. "She always saw what others ignored. She saw me once," Graham added, almost to himself, "when I didn't know how to be seen." They followed the gravel path until they reached the headstone. Simple, weathered, honest. The engraved letters were chipped but clear. Selena A. Walker and the years beneath. Talia knelt and traced the name with her fingertips. No tears today. The grief lived deeper now, quieter, not smaller. Graham stepped forward and placed the camellias at the base of the stone. He stayed standing, expression tight. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a velvet-wrapped object. "I didn't know when I'd give this to you," he whispered, "but this feels like the right place." He handed it to Talia like he was handing over a piece of regret. Talia unwrapped it slowly. A worn silver locket. Smooth from years of handling, or maybe years of almost handling. She opened it. On one side, Selena at 20, laughing, eyes bright. On the other, a pressed white camellia. Graham's voice cracked. "She gave this to me after our last night together. I didn't wear it. I didn't even open it again until recently." Shame sat behind every word. Talia's thumb traced the locket's edge. She loved giving people pieces of herself, Talia murmured, like she was afraid to give too much. Graham swallowed. "She gave me more than I deserved," he said, "and far more than I acknowledged." Wind moved through magnolia leaves like quiet applause from a world that remembered her even when people didn't. Talia stared at the headstone. "When she got sick, she made voice notes, just in case," she said. "I still have them." Graham looked at her carefully. "I wish I'd been there." he admitted. Talia didn't flinch. "You weren't," she said. "Not cruel, just true. But you're here now, and you're not hiding." Graham nodded slowly, like accepting a rule he could no longer dodge. Talia knelt again and placed the locket beside the flowers. "I think she'd like this," she whispered. "Not because it's perfect, because it's real." They stayed until the sun dipped and shadows stretched long. Neither wanted to leave first. Eventually, cold crept in. As they walked back, Graham broke the silence. "My father told me emotion was weakness," he said, "that dignity meant silence. But your mother proved him wrong with every brushstroke." Talia glanced at him. "You don't have to be your father," she said. Graham met her eyes. "I know," he replied. "I'm trying." At the gate, Talia paused. "I want to come back here," she said. Graham answered quickly, like a vow. "Every year on this day, I'll come, with you, if you'll allow it." Talia gave a small nod. "We'll see." Outside the cemetery, they stopped under a magnolia tree heavy with budding promise. Graham pulled out an envelope and held it out. "What's this?" Talia asked. "Not legal," he said, "not official, just words, mine." Talia took it carefully, like it might cut. The paper inside was handwritten, neat, deliberate, exposed. "Dear Talia," it began. Graham stood still while she read. He wrote about missing her birth, her first steps, scraped knees, fevers, drawings, heartbreaks, everything he never earned the right to know. He wrote, "If you'll let me, I want to be here for what comes next." No demands, no entitlement, just a request to try. Talia folded the letter and slipped it into her coat. She surprised herself with her next words. "Let's get coffee," she said. "There's a place 2 blocks from here, not fancy. But their peach cobbler tastes like the way she used to make it." Graham's face softened into a real smile. No strategy in it. "Lead the way," he said quietly. And they walked side by side down Savannah streets. No headlines, no cameras, just 2 people learning the shape of something new. The cafe wasn't special. White-painted brick, a squeaky ceiling fan, a smudged chalkboard menu, and a tip jar that read, "Give what you can, get what you need." But to Talia, it felt like home. Selena used to bring her here when treatments allowed small joys. Selena loved the peach cobbler. Talia remembered her mother humming over tea, sketching strangers with a pen that always ran out of ink too soon. Now, years later, Talia sat at the same table across from the man who could have been there all along. If life had broken differently, if he'd chosen love over legacy. Graham took a bite of cobbler. "Your mother had good taste," he said. Talia answered softly. She usually did, except when it came to trusting silence. Graham nodded, accepting the sting like a deserved bruise. "She deserved more than what I gave her," he said. "She deserved to be fought for." Talia watched him a long moment. "Why didn't you?" she asked. Graham's fork paused mid-air. He set it down slowly and looked her straight in the eye, no flinching left. "I was raised to believe men like me owned the world. As long as we didn't make waves," Graham said. "My father made it clear. Love her, and you lose everything. Money, respect, inheritance." His voice tightened. "I was too young, or too cowardly, to see what I'd lose by staying quiet was greater than anything they could take." Talia didn't answer immediately. She let the truth sit between them. "You said something at the gallery," Graham continued, "about being known as someone with a story that matters." He leaned forward slightly. "You matter, Talia. Not because you might be my daughter," because of who you became despite what I wasn't. The words weren't perfect, but they were real, and real mattered more than polished. Talia looked down at her hands, then at the window where rain began to gather. I used to imagine you showing up at school, she admitted. Parent-teacher night, just once. I didn't care if you were rich, I just wanted someone to show up. Graham's jaw tightened. I hate that I wasn't there. Talia's voice stayed calm. I don't need you to hate it. I need you to carry it, so you don't repeat it. Graham nodded slowly. I'm trying. Talia leaned back, exhaling. And I'm trying to let you, she said. That's the hard part. Outside, southern rain began, soft, steady, like watercolor. It reminded Talia of Selena's paintings, blue streaks on brown paper, sadness made beautiful without being softened. Talia stood and tugged her coat closer. Walk me to the station? Of course, Graham said, already reaching for an umbrella. They walked down wet sidewalks past old bookstores and quiet porches. Neither spoke at first. At the station awning, Talia paused. This doesn't fix everything, she said. We lost a lot we can't get back. Graham nodded. I know. He swallowed. But it's a start, if you'll let it be. Talia studied him, power in his posture, humility newly built into his spine. My mother said love wasn't just being there, Talia said. It was staying, even when it's inconvenient, even when it hurts. Graham's voice came quick, steady. I'm not leaving. Talia held his eyes a long beat. Then, for the first time, she stepped forward and hugged him, brief, careful, but full. When she pulled back, she spoke softly. Next year, same day, magnolia tree. Graham's smile warmed. I'll be there, he said, even if you're not. Talia stepped onto the train without looking back, not because she didn't care, but because she finally didn't have to wonder if he'd vanish. Graham stayed on the platform long after the train moved away, umbrella hanging useless at his side. Rain traced lines down his face, but he didn't move. He felt every drop not as weather, but permission. To regret, to rebuild, to finally be honest. Back in Chicago a week later, Talia returned to the art studio where she taught weekend classes. One student, a 10-year-old girl with paint on her elbows, asked, Do grown-ups get scared? Talia smiled. All the time, she said, but some of them keep showing up anyway. That night, Talia opened her sketchbook and drew 3 hands, one weathered, one youthful, one older, reaching toward each other like a bridge being built from scratch. On each wrist, the same crescent mark. Not a label, a legacy rewritten. Sometimes family isn't born in hospital rooms or holiday dinners. Sometimes it's forged in rain, in truth spoken late, but spoken. Weeks passed, and the noise around the press confession didn't fully die, it just changed shape. Headlines moved on, but people didn't. Emails came to Talia from strangers thanking her for naming the cost of silence. Graham didn't overwhelm her with contact. He sent one message a week. No pressure, no demands, just proof of presence. That restraint mattered more than grand gestures ever could. When spring edged closer, Graham invited Talia to lunch near the Riverwalk. Neutral ground, open air, no spotlight. He arrived early, alone, and stood instead of sitting, like he didn't want to claim space she hadn't offered. Talia watched him from across the street before approaching, measuring the difference between performance and change. His shoulders were quieter now, less armor, more accountability. They didn't call each other father and daughter. Not yet, maybe not ever. But they talked about Selena's paintings, about Talia's childhood, about what was stolen by silence. Graham listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, He didn't decorate the truth. At the end, Talia didn't hug him. She simply said, "See you next week." And Graham nodded like he'd been handed oxygen. That night, Graham returned to his office and opened the third envelope from Selena. His hands didn't shake this time. The letter wasn't gentle. It was honest, about loneliness, about being judged, about building a life with no safety net. And still, it carried love like a hidden pulse. Graham read until dawn, then placed the letter beside Talia's sketch and her note. 3 relics. 1 lesson. Love that stays is love that speaks. Across town, Talia stood in front of her mirror, not rehearsing a speech this time, just studying her own face. Selena's eyes, Graham's jawline, her own stubborn mouth. She whispered, "I'm not a secret." Then she texted Mrs. Hargrove a photo of her newest drawing. Mrs. Hargrove replied in seconds, "That's your voice, baby. Keep using it." And for the first time, the future didn't feel like a locked door. Because family isn't always built in perfect beginnings. Sometimes it's built in late arrivals, hard truths, and the slow, sacred decision to stay. And in that decision, made imperfectly, made honestly, Talia stopped carrying the weight of being forgotten alone. The silence didn't disappear, but it finally made room for something louder. Choice! Silence always sends a bill! Some of you have lived long enough to know this. What we refuse to face doesn't disappear. It waits. One nickel-sized crescent on a wrist stopped a whole gala because it carried 22 years of unanswered why. Graham didn't just lose Selena. He lost every birthday, every school play, every "Are you coming?" that never got answered. Silence may look dignified, but it can be a thief in a tailored suit. Accountability isn't a speech, it's showing up. A public confession is dramatic, sure, but the real test is what happens the next morning. Graham didn't send lawyers first. He listened. He owned the cowardice. He let Talia set the pace, and he stopped trying to buy his way into being family. For those of us 65 plus, we've seen plenty of men apologize when the cameras are rolling. The difference is whether they stay when nobody's clapping. Healing is slow, but it's still possible. Rebuilding isn't a grand reunion. It's small, steady steps. A handwritten letter, a grave visit, coffee a few blocks from where pain began. Talia didn't need him. She needed truth. And when truth finally got spoken out loud, the future stopped feeling like a locked door. Sometimes love arrives late, but it still counts. If it stays, now I want to hear from you. If you were Talia, would you meet him again, or would you protect your peace and keep walking? And if you were Graham, what would you do to prove you're better than silence? Not for a headline, but for a daughter's heart. Share your thoughts in the comments because your life experience matters here, especially if you've lived through family secrets, lost years, or second chances. If this story moved you, please hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next lesson-packed episode.